distinguished guest, welcome to another episode of Life on the Grid, hosted by Kobe Lambeth and Joe Samaniego. Today's guest, Rob Tiongson from the Podium Finish, musical guest Travis Mason, all right here on Life on the Grid.
Here's the uptown Charlotte skyline from the WBTV webcam located in the heart of NASCAR country. Hello, everyone. We hope that you had a happy, safe Thanksgiving. Welcome to another edition of Life on the Grid. My name is Kobe Lambeth from the podiumfinish.net, and with me, as always, Joe Samaniego. And Thanksgiving is a special day to gather with family and count our many blessings. And for some, this is the only time each year that they get to see certain members of their family. And definitely a fun time to socialize and catch up with those people. Watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in the morning, and then later in the day, checking out NFL football. Sorry for all you Detroit Lions fans out there. I'm sure Thanksgiving Day is really tough for you guys. And yeah, and it was tough this past weekend when my Carolina Panthers beat you guys 20-0. So haha, I get the last laugh here for now at least. And the granddaddy of them all, delicious Thanksgiving dinner. And I'm not really of a turkey person, to be honest with you. I prefer ham actually, along with macaroni and cheese, green beans, collard greens, and sweet tea to drink. And for dessert, you can never go wrong with homemade Rice Krispie treats that my uncle Stan's make. Really love those. Missed out on it this year, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. And also love my grandma's chocolate cake. And Joe, just repeating all those foods, I'm making myself very hungry now. Yes, I'm probably gonna have to get some leftovers soon. And while I was still fortunate enough to enjoy all of my typical Thanksgiving favorites for the most part, that's not the most important thing happening right now in the world. As we all know, we're still living in a global pandemic, and it's getting much, much worse. And for safety purposes, some families made the ultimate sacrifice, as they have been all year since the pandemic started, of staying home and not seeing their family on Thanksgiving, while others weighed the pros and cons, deciding to travel anyways. And here at Grit Network, we're definitely not here to judge anyone for the decisions they make. And we want you to know we respect your views, whether you stayed home or not. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we just want you all to stay safe and healthy. That's all we want. And looking at some of the other situations going on in the country, families are starving all across the United States. And when watching the news, I've seen extremely long lines at the food banks. Yet families have to go there in order to feed all their loved ones, and it's just really sad to watch. And a number of positive COVID-19 cases are exploding at a really scary rate. And sadly, death rates are rising. Not good at all. And hospitals all across the country are starting to reach full capacity, and the situation is getting more dire. Joe, this is definitely a serious situation. And my question for you, how are you and your family holding up during this nerve-wracking time period?
It's definitely nerve-wracking. I think as you mentioned, same thing's going on here in Oregon, all the challenges, the struggles. Of course, we're in a 2-week lockdown. They're calling it a pause. And then, of course, I got a lot of family up north in Alaska, which has seen a lot of cases going on. And it's just something different, like, having to schedule a Zoom call yesterday with all my siblings, my parents up in Alaska. It was just like, okay, it's not the same. And even as you were talking about all the food, like, it was good. I enjoyed it all. It's still, there's that missing element. I know this past weekend, I had to drive 120 plus miles, 2 hours, to pick up tamale mix for my mom because it's not available in Alaska, but the factory was right here in Oregon. So did that. She's gonna be making tamales, mailing it out, and it's just something that has been like, okay, making the best. We had a wonderful trip and all. Just to go out there, we were safe. Hardly interacted with anybody except the tamale factory folks. Got the mix, but it's just something where I know, thinking about just everyone out there being since we started this grid network, it's been really wonderful meeting people on Twitter, our Instagram, our TikTok, learning about them. And I just think about all our viewers are almost like family, especially in our Discord server where, they mean a lot. And we all love racing. It's just like, when we were all used to be in high school together, we all had a school pride usually. And, we want the best for everyone. we just want the best because at the end, it'll be we know, we all enjoy racing. We're all a community, and I've been thinking about it, everyone and all the people that I know are going through worse things because I know there's a lot of unfortunate things going on this year, and it's just been a different Thanksgiving overall.
Yeah, definitely been a different Thanksgiving overall for for my family, your family, and many other people as well. It's yeah, and I understand the holiday season. This is typically a time of year where we see depression at an all-time high. People have had a really rough time, especially when you lose loved ones and for so many families all over the world who have lost someone from COVID-19, Thanksgiving and Christmas is not going to be the same. Is yeah, the holiday season is going to be really sad this year, and it's just really unfortunate that we're in this position. And hopefully, moving forward, we we can find a way out of this. Yeah, no, we're going to have some vaccines coming up in the in the future. Yeah, very soon. Hopefully, within weeks from now, and maybe that can help us get control of this pandemic and we can return to a pre-pandemic life with some normalcy. And for my family, I'm gonna be honest, Joe. We're starting to get a little leery because of the state of North Carolina. They put up this map showing all of the different hotspots in the states, and they have three tiers: yellow, which is like significant, and then the moderate is like orange, and then the red is like like not good at all. And we were in the yellow. We've been upgraded to the orange, and the county right below us is in the red. So cases are going crazy, exploding everywhere, and it's a situation where we all have to be careful. Yeah, only right now I'm only we're only going out for essentials. We're not gonna do and just like go and sit out and eat at a restaurant right now. Just because we can. Yeah, while definitely not going to knock anybody who's done that during the pandemic, yeah, definitely their right to do that. Is this that's just a risk that my family personally is not willing to take because like I'm the youngest one here, age 21, and typically a lot of people my age who get this virus, they aren't bad things aren't necessarily happening to them in comparison to people who of older populations, but this virus doesn't care how old you are. I actually just recently read a story of a 21-year-old college student in North Carolina who died from coronavirus. Yeah, so it can definitely touch people of all ages, no matter what. But looking at my family, I'm actually very concerned about them because my mom's 58, my aunt is 60, and my grandma's 80, and they're definitely in the higher risk category. So as a result, I'm not going to be out there putting myself at risk, putting my family at risk because I know if I'd feel really horrible if I went out having a good time, brought home the virus and got all of them sick and something bad happened. I'd feel really bad and I'd never be able to get over it because that's just some guilt that I'd never ever want to feel. And if anyone out there has a loved one in a higher risk category, I encourage you to make the best decision possible for them. And it seems like in our society, it's a me first. Yeah, people always put themselves first. Seems kind of selfish at times, but just know when you have other people in your household who might not be as lucky as you, if they get sick, yeah, just think that your actions have consequences, and they're not only going to affect you, they can affect your loved ones as well.
Yeah, it is something that is really hard for everyone, especially in the news saw where one person was like, "I'm not gonna stop traveling to go see my babies." It's like this is something where it's been really hard for a lot of folks, and while we are aware there is the good news that Pfizer, Moderna, they both have vaccines that are essentially coming out to help fight the pandemic. AstraZeneca as well as has a vaccine with Oxford University that's looking very promising. There are some promising signs ahead, and there are some essentially light at the end of the tunnel hopes. One of the things, and you mentioned earlier about the depression, I know that's something where not too long ago we had Mental Health Awareness Month, which is great that we are bringing awareness of mental health. And I just want to again encourage because I know this year, 2020, a lot of folks, including myself, there's just been days been depressed, been down, and it just the way this year is, nobody should just feel alone. Like hey, I'm being down, I'm being depressed. You're not the only ones. I've had days too this year where I was just out of it. And I just encourage everyone, definitely, if you're feeling down and you're not feeling well, contact somebody, talk to somebody. I know, even if it's, I'm on Twitter too, I don't mind listening. You know, when you got a family, a good friend member, somebody you trust, a professional, definitely mental health is very important. I encourage everyone to make sure you take care of themselves because we understand, especially the holidays, can sometimes be very difficult for a lot of folks. Seasonal affective disorder, SAD, that is really big problem, especially in Alaska, where like Barrow, Alaska, Utiavik, 3 months, no sunlight, no vitamin D. That's makes it where it gets really hard, especially when you have depression there. So definitely encourage everyone to take care of themselves, and don't be afraid to reach out because you're not the only one going through it. Looking ahead to essentially a post-pandemic world, there's a lot of things, of course, we've been missing. Especially think about it with the holidays, we've missed a lot. When conditions improve, what's one of the things you miss the most and you can't wait to do again, Kobe?
Well, actually, Joe, I can't think of one thing, so I'm going to name a few things. Number one, I'd actually like to go sit out and eat with my family again inside of a restaurant, and not be wondering, is today I'm going to get infected by COVID-19? Is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen 10 minutes from now? And those rambling thoughts right now in my head. That's exactly why I haven't been out to eat at a restaurant, because for me personally, it's not worth the risk. For me, I know some of my family, other family members and my friends. I've seen them go out to eat, and I don't have a problem with that at all, because they're entitled to do that. That's them. Yeah, and I support them whatever they do. Just for me personally, and everyone else who lives in my household, we've decided that it's not worth the risk to go sit out and eat at a restaurant, especially when you look at the scientific data showing that showing that a lot of people who test positive have ate at a restaurant within the last 2 weeks. So, after seeing the data look more concrete over time, we've decided we're going to wait until a lot of people have been vaccinated before we even think about sitting inside of a restaurant again. Yeah, so that's one. And number two, definitely like to go back to my campus, UNC Charlotte, and I'm a senior there, and unfortunately, it looks like I'm not going to be able to return at all my entire senior year. So basically, I'm just going to get 3 years, and that's it. Being on campus and in the classroom, and then it seems like my entire senior year is going to be online, and and might not even get a graduation ceremony. It just might be, hey, hey, click this link in your email, look at the live stream. They're going to read your name, read your mail, your diploma, and that's it. Yeah, and that's really unfortunate. I feel bad for the last group of seniors, high school and college alike. They, they didn't get a graduation ceremony. Well, I mean, some of them did. They had graduation ceremonies in creative ways, and while others they didn't even get that at all, which is really sad. And I feel bad for the high school seniors that graduated back in the spring, because some of those kids will never get to go to prom. They'll never get to experience it. I remember my senior prom in high school. That was a real special night for me, and that's a memory that I'll always have. And I feel awful for all of the people out there who won't have that. Yeah, yeah. So very unfortunate. And and when I'm a UNC Charlotte alum, I like to go back, walk the campus if I have some free time, yeah, because it's a beautiful campus. Really enjoy walking it, and go to sporting events. Definitely want to return to football games. Maybe I'll check out some sports I didn't check out when I was actually on campus, like basketball, baseball, maybe a soccer game here and there. You walk through the student union, eat at Wendy's or Bojangles like I always did. Yeah, just great memories that I'll always have. And I'll admit, Joe, it really hurts knowing that part of my life is gonna be over. Not gonna be able to make any more college memories. Probably not gonna be able to make any new college friends as well. Yeah, so that's definitely some of the things that I'm looking forward to moving forward.
I hear you. I know I visited the campus there once before, UNC Charlotte, beautiful campus. And then, of course, when I was in school, South Carolina, I fell in love with Bojangles, one of my favorite places. Bunch of good places down the southeast. And yeah, I know when it comes to post pandemic, I'm just looking forward to again, just enjoying. I'm a big foodie. Portland here, of course, is a big foodie destination place. I can't wait to go back again. Right as the pandemic was starting up, it was Foodie Appreciation Month or something like that in Portland, where all the restaurants had specials. Unfortunately, the pandemic ended everything prematurely. And of course, the big thing, the Portland Grand Prix here at Portland International Raceway, the IndyCar race, and 2021. Oh my gosh, assuming if everything could go all right and we could attend the race, you're going to have the NTT IndyCar drivers, including Scott Dixon, legend there, Joseph Newgarden, Scott McLaughlin, Australian Supercar champion, and Jimmy Johnson. Oh man, that's going to be so star-studded. There's so many things, but yeah, definitely I would say, the little things. I can't wait to enjoy them again post-pandemic world.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Portland. Yeah, we definitely hope that things improve by then, so we can get you out there representing Grid Network at Portland International Raceway, and hopefully my 1 year streak of missing the Charlotte Roval is, it was only 2020, and maybe in 2021 things are better by then, where I can feel comfortable enough to return to the racetrack. And I definitely miss being at the Roval. Seeing all of my friends in the industry, in the garage area, in the media center. Yeah, those are some special times in the 2 years before 2020. Got to meet a lot of people, make some great connections, and build relationships that have lasted ever since then. And not being at the Roval this year, it was really strange watching it on TV, because that was the first time I've ever watched it on TV, because I've been out to every race since the inaugural Roval weekend. And when you don't have those things anymore, you realize you do take a lot of things for granted in life. I know I've taken some things for granted, be like, oh, there's always going to be next year. There's always going to be next year. And last year at this time, I just assumed that 2020 was going to be a normal year, like every other year. But you know, I'm sure a lot of people thought that, and I was wrong. Everybody was wrong, and moving forward, just hopefully we can get these vaccines circulating all over the world, and we can get back to a sense of normalcy. And the big thing for me, I really can't wait to go out in public and not feel paranoid about contracting this virus and bringing it home to my loved ones, because that's one of the biggest thing that really eats me up inside, because I'm more worried about them than I am myself. I feel really guilty if something bad happened to them, and if I was the cause of it. Yeah. So just gonna try to do the best I can. I'm sure we both will, Joe. Stay here working hard at Grit Network, and as time passes by, we're all gonna be all right. Yeah. Yeah, and looks like it's finally time for us to introduce our guests for the month of November. Joe, we've been talking for a little while now. Hopefully our guest is not falling asleep on us, and he's someone that I know extremely well. This man is my editor-in-chief at the Podium Finish, and he contributes to NASCAR Pole Position magazine. Please give a warm welcome to Rob Tiongson. Rob, how are you doing tonight?
Hey Joe, hey Kobe, doing well. How about you guys?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Doing good here. Excited to have you on the show today, Rob.
Yeah, Rob,
I'm
we're
glad
very
to,
excited.
to say I'm glad to be here. It's such a joy to be on the show.
Yeah, Rob, we're very excited to have a member of the Podium Finish finally on the show. And for starters, let's discuss the media outlet that you've proudly built over the years at the Podium Finish. And I know you already know this, but I'm so proud to be a part of this wonderful team. You basically took me in when I literally had nowhere else to go. I've learned a lot from you over the past few years, and you're someone that I respect tremendously and value your opinion on anything. And I want to thank you for allowing me to come over to Grit Network and help Joe build up this program, just like you worked hard to put together a wonderful team at the Podium Finish. And here's my question for you to kick things off. What's the story of how the Podium Finish came to be from the very beginning until now?
But first off, Kobe, I'm so glad we got you on the team, and it's a pleasure. It's a mutual benefit to have you on the organization, and just I feel like I become a better editor in chief and writer having you and our great staff on the team. As far as the origin story of the Podium Finish, it's kind of a really fun story. For the sake of time, I'll give you the moderately long version. So, as I probably mentioned to you, off the record, um, I was a race fan for a long time. I grew up watching NASCAR races back in 1991 when I was 5 years old. Just kind of a channel surfing situation in the summer where my family and I were pretty bored, and the Boston sports teams weren't doing so hot that year, so we had a trial run of ESPN, and it just so happened to be August, I think, of 1991, when it was the Michigan race on ESPN, where Dale Jarrett beat Davey Allison by like a really close margin of victory. And as a 5-year-old, I was so amazed and fascinated by the speed, the competition, and just the trust that was displayed between Dale Jarrett and Davey Allison on that afternoon. I mean, I didn't know the drivers. I can't say like I had a favorite back then, but I just really love seeing cars going that fast and not crashing. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I don't know if I'll ever become a race car driver, but I'd like to keep my eyes on it. So I watched it over the years. I didn't really like have a hardcore favorite, but I watched it religiously. Kind of fast forwarding that whole story, obviously I grew up as a huge Jeff Gordon fan, just because I thought he was different, like me. Not to put too fine a point on it, because being a Filipino American, I don't think there's a lot of us who watch NASCAR. So it was really cool to be the one person in my family who didn't like football initially or watch basketball. My Sunday activity since 1991 has been watching NASCAR. But as far as the media organization itself, it's really, it was a dream, really. When I was studying in the Philippines in 2008 in De La Salle University, I kind of was feeling homesick at the time, because I was starting to realize how much I missed living in the United States, even though I was enjoying my experiences in the Philippines. So I remember that I was sitting in the student activity center in my college, and I had a little notebook, PC. It was so small, it's like no bigger than the size of my high school diploma that I'm holding right here. It was this small. And I was like, well, let's just go look on J-Ski, look at the articles that he's posted. And I was thinking, and I was a cocky 22-year-old kid at the time, I was like, these writers are not good. I can do a better job than that, which obviously is a really confident and overconfident and pretty not so humble perspective. But it's kind of weird to hear that from me, because I don't think I come across as really like boastful. But when I was younger, I was a lot more aggressive about my confidence and more like, oh, I'm a go-getter. Let's just do it. Let's just get this job done. So I was, looking at websites at the time, and I didn't really know how to do HTML, CSS, or how to even like run a domain or anything like that. So I took a chance on this website called Bleacher Report, and I wrote about field fillers, because I was like, well, everybody knows about Kyle Busch. They know about Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, Carl Edwards at the time. Why not talk about people like AJ Allmendinger, Mike Skinner at the time, when he was kind of like the second Red Bull driver during that season in 2008. And, I decided to kind of be like not like Brock Beard with the last car. What he does is amazing, by the way, with that. But I was like, let me kind of like just see if people would read my stuff. Maybe I can take this a little seriously and make something out of it. And I guess I did a good enough job and impressed the editors over at Bleacher Report that I was one of the 9 original featured columnists on that website. So like Kelly Crandell, who's obviously a really successful motorsports journalist, she started on that team. I was on that team as well, along with Kara Martin, who is a good friend of mine to this day, and Mary Jo Buchanan, a really good writer turned racing fan. And, for a couple of years, I was your featured columnist. But at the same time, I started to get the itch to want to have my own creative freedom. So around that same time, like around, mid to late 2009, I decided I wanted some creative freedom. I wanted to have a voice as a minority. So I created the Podium Finish. And it's kind of a funny name, because in NASCAR, obviously, and I don't know if it's an American mentality, but I think we always have this emphasis of winners only. If you get second and third, you're a loser. And it's like, no, if you got second and third place in a race, yeah, I mean, you didn't win, but it's a lot of hard work to get to the podium, to get that top 3. And, you beat a lot of the best drivers in the world that day. So I started this website called the Podium Finish. And originally it was just going to be a one-man operation. I thought, oh, I could do this. I could be the editor. I could be the writer. And eventually I could be my own photographer. And, I realized it was really overwhelming trying to study in a school and to be a journalist, and also kind of have a social life as well, living overseas, learning another language, getting used to the culture overseas. So, I did it. I did it for a while, and then I became a guest on a podcast run by now Summer Bedgood. I think it was called Next Time By, and it made me realize, I actually like talking to other people. I'm not as antisocial as I thought I was. I was kind of a lone wolf person where, I was the kind of student in the student activity center who probably, not like you couldn't bother me, but I didn't mind being alone. But if you approached me at the time, I'd probably talk to you. But when I got to be on her podcast, it made me realize how much I wanted a team. So I decided to extend the team in 2013 with Ashley Hobbs, who became my assistant editor-in-chief and my numbers guru person, our statistician, of course. And over the years, we've built it up. Of course, we have you on the team. We've got a lot of talented photographers like Josh Jones. We've got, Jonathan Huff on the team. We've got Landon from the West Coast as well. Just so many people I can name right now that are on our team that I'm so proud to have, just because we're all from different backgrounds of life. You're a student in UNC Charlotte, and no, it's not exactly the most ideal semester, but let me promise you, you're going to accomplish a lot of things. This is just the beginning. I'm really proud of what you've been able to accomplish during these circumstances. So keep your head up high on things, because I'm not even thinking about going back to school myself. While kind of getting off topic, going into grad school, I'm just kind of deciding between two universities at the moment. So I'm always curious to learn about things. I love the academic scholarship, like scholarly world, I guess. But most of all, I just love working around people. I mean, we're in a pandemic, as you've mentioned, Joe, and you've really had a good conversation about how tough it's been to have social interactions. And as human beings, I think we thirst for that interaction. But for me, having this show, having Zoom, having, cell phones, even though I know social media can be, I guess, the devil at times, when used properly, it is a great tool to keep in touch with the world and, engaging your mental health as well. I mean, I have family all over the country and in Canada that, I'm always worried about. Obviously, my situation here in my home in Austin, Texas, where, I have my family here. I'm always like thinking ahead of time of what I want to do. I know the long answer to your question, but basically the Podium Finish started off as a one-man vision, but it's really a team of everybody.
Yeah, I really like your answer there, and that's Joe's vision here as well here at Great Network. Joe started off as a one man show. I know he'll get into that a little later on in the program. At first, it was Joe with the Great Ranking. Started working with a guy named Matt White, who's at the Great World Motorsport League, and then after that, Joe reached out to me, and we just started growing the program from there. So now we have, I believe, at least 5 people with Grit Network. I don't. Yeah, I can't think of the specific number right off the top of my head, but it's really nice to see the one man vision become something more than one person. Where it's really hard to do something all by yourself, but when you have a great team of wonderful people working hard and committing to one vision. Yeah, I understand people have multiple visions on how things should go, but yeah, everyone's voice should be heard when those major decisions are about to be made. But at the end of the day, you need to have a set culture and make sure everybody is buying into that one vision. And there's one part you mentioned in your answer that I can really relate to. It seems like you were describing me when you were talking about your time in college when you were like very quiet, like the quiet kid that you were then. That's who I've always been for most of my life. For the most part, I'm not someone to initiate conversations. I'm not gonna go up and approach someone. But if someone approached me, I'll have a great conversation with them. And for a lot of the friends that I've made in person, a lot of those happen from people actually coming up to me. I remember in my history class sophomore year, I believe, yeah, I believe it was sophomore year. It was North Carolina history. There was someone who lived in my building and had seen me around, and I'd never noticed that person before. And then one day in class, she actually came up to me and said, "Hey, you live in my building," and I'm like, I do, yeah, 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 it just shows that there's someone's always watching you, and I was just like blown away. Then this person, just starts being really nice to me, and I was just shocked, to be honest. I was like, wow, people don't ever approach me like that for friendship, and and from then we became really good friends. Yeah. Then we walked to class together. Then we walked back to our dorm. Just and we had dinner in the diner hall a lot. Yeah, almost every day. But it was just a great friendship, and it just it just proved to me that, hey, I'm worthy of being someone's friend, because for most of my life, I'll be honest with you, Rob, I really haven't had a lot of friends in my personal life, and that's still true today. For the most part, I have friends in my professional life. Yeah, made a lot of great friends in the motorsports industry, but as far as things go outside of racing, there's not really a lot of people that I have in my life, and that's something that I'm working to improve. Yeah, my confidence is improving, and I'm just naturally a socially awkward person. So, and it's always been very hard for me to be able to relate to people, and develop friendships, because I've always felt like I've been the oddball, because, because growing up in this small town, Reidsville, North Carolina, not a lot of people love NASCAR or motorsports. So I was always someone who was different, someone who liked racing, and to be more specific, a person of color who likes racing. And that's something that a lot of people thought was so odd. They were like, "Why do you like NASCAR?" And they thought that I should have liked something that would be more believable, like football or basketball. And and I do love those sports. I enjoy watching my Carolina Panthers, and enjoy watching the Tar Heels in college basketball, Charlotte Hornets and the Lakers in the NBA. But my heart's always been with motorsports, and that's something that I've always loved my entire life. And 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 when and it's just like very difficult making friends. Yeah, with the social interactions, I've never understood like why that's been so difficult for me. But but looking at you, Rob, and how far you've grown over the years, you're definitely someone that I can use as a role model, and try to break out of this, I guess, dry spell socially, improve my social skills, and just put myself out there. And other things that I've admired about you, Rob, is your leadership abilities and writing skills with your incredible feature stories. You've led the team through some tough, uncomfortable situations, off the record, that we both know about. And as editor in chief, you have a lot of responsibilities on your plate, especially with your other commitments at work and role with NASCAR Pole Position magazine, which we'll touch on a little later in the program. And being the strong, fearless leader that you are, you don't tell us what we want to hear. You tell us what we need to hear. Yeah, and need to put a little emphasis on need to hear. But and that right there is leadership at its finest. And that's the heart and soul of the Podium Finish. How have you grown as a team leader over the years?
I think the one thing I have learned to do is to take criticism and be open about feedback. I know that at times I can be pretty stern with my messaging and just like the goals that we have to accomplish, especially if you're new to the team, just because I try to pass along the experiences I've had at the racetrack to those who are joining the team, especially if you're younger or a little bit older, you're kind of working like in an office job or another job, and you've never been to the racetrack and you're curious about getting into the media world. I try to make that process a little bit easier, just because I had to find out the hard way of how to be a good journalist, not just on writing articles, but how to present yourself to people, how to treat people, how to respect the sport itself, and the people who give you those opportunities. You have to understand that you know you're not just some race fan anymore. You're a journalist, and people are going to look up to you for truths and information. When there's lies out there, you should challenge them. You should not be afraid to, say, "Hey, I don't think that's true. Here's why I think this is the case." When it comes to team leadership, you have to, you know, of course, check your ego at the door, but you also have to sometimes be the unpopular person. Like you said, sometimes I have to be the person that has to deliver what you have to hear versus what you don't want to hear. And obviously during this year, it was a little challenging in the beginning of the year for reasons I won't mention, but we've talked about off the record. But I'm overall proud of the way that our team got together, pulled together through it. And, during the pandemic, I feel like we've gotten better about our communication. I know it's been disappointing for all of the team to not have gone to a race. Like you mentioned, you didn't go to the Roval race for the first time since it ran in 2018. Well, I didn't go to a race for the first time since 2014, which was really tough, watching the Texas races from home. But, obviously I thought for my family, I'm like, yeah, it would, not to sound kind of indignant or unappreciative, but like, I don't think it would have been a great idea for me to go to the press box and cover the race when I could do the very same thing from my home and know that I'm minimizing the risk of getting my parents sick, my nephew and niece, my sister, my brother-in-law, or anybody around me, or even myself get sick. I would rather, do what NASCAR has given to us with the virtual media center, doing the pressers through Zoom, and just trying to work with the drivers and teams with their schedule and my schedule. Like, I kind of struck up a balance with them where I try to fit them with their schedule, but of course, I work a different job during the day, and I have to keep that in mind as well. And a lot of the things I learned from my office job, I apply that too with the Podium Finish. And at the end of the day, I look for the outlet to be fun. It should be a really loose environment, but it also needs to be a polished one too. I demand excellence from my team. I demand professionalism, but I also, expect everybody to be respectful of each other's views. You and Joe, it kind of resonated with me how you guys were saying, like, you won't down anybody for having an opposing viewpoint, and that's the same way I am too. I mean, I may subscribe to certain viewpoints, but I respect if you don't agree with me. That's fine. I would rather we actually sometimes don't even agree on things if we do it respectfully. And I think that's the one thing that I feel like we've built on this year is a lot of admiration and respect, not just with the leadership to everybody on the team, but everybody as on the whole. Because I feel like at the end of the day, we're all equals on the team. I just run the website, I pay the bills, but I'm no different than you. I just kind of make the decisions, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true, and I do agree that's something that we've really worked on this year at the Podium Finish, been able to see things from a different viewpoint and respectfully disagree because it seems like in recent years, respect has kind of gone out the window. I'm not talking about the Podium Finish, you're just talking about in general, no matter where you are, whether it's with your colleagues at work or even family and friends. When you have it seems like nowadays when people have a different viewpoint, there's a lot of anger present, and that leads to division where you don't want to talk to that person. There's not going to be any civil conversations, and I feel like that's a place where we've really gotten away from as a society, and hopefully moving forward, a lot of people will be able to look in the mirror and realize that that's not who we need to be as a society. We need to get back to the days where we can actually have a civil disagreement and not walk away hating one another. Because in my opinion, this is not the way it should be. Yeah, we all have different viewpoints on different things, but my opinion doesn't make me any better than you, and vice versa. What you think doesn't make you any better than me, because at the end of the day, we're all equal. We're all human beings. And next, I want to briefly touch on your writing skills. And when I first joined the Podium Finish and read your feature stories, I was absolutely blown away at how talented of a writer you are. If a young writer asks me whose writing he or she should study to improve their own writing skills, I'd definitely say check out All Pieces from Rob Tiongson. He's definitely one of the most solid writers that I've ever come across. And we definitely encourage all of our viewers to take time and read Rob's articles. Trust me, you'll be amazed and you will not be disappointed. And here's my question for you, Rob. How did you develop these solid writing skills? Was it through school, self-taught, or did you have people guiding you along the way?
It's honestly a combination of all those elements you mentioned. And thank you, by the way. That really means a lot. I would, kind of pay it back to you and say, younger writers that are getting into the racing world or sports world, I would say that they should look up to you as well. I think you're very expressive and really well thought with your compositions in the racing world. In terms of my writing mindset, I definitely think a lot of the beginning of that the genesis of that came from, obviously the classroom. Without naming too many names, I think a lot of my high school teachers I would credit, Mrs. Concannon, who was probably the most strict English teacher I ever had in my life. I thought she was a really tough teacher, but honestly, they always say the tough teachers are the ones that you respect years later, and I can safely say that, 18, 20 years later. And there was a teacher from my elementary school years. Her name was Mrs. Kaufman in 6th grade. We used to do assignments where she would give us a magazine ad, and she would want us to write a 2-page story on it, on like those little Mead notebooks. And it's funny because it could be any kind of ad. And I just so happened to get the Marlboro Man, cigarette man. I don't know why. And I was just writing this literal story about how he was a cigarette smoker. And my teacher's like, come on, look at that picture. What do you really think? What kind of story is going on? So like I decided to tap into my brain a little bit and, kind of make it a really deep story that a 12-year-old would write. And it kind of made me feel like, hey, I can trust myself, trust my instincts, with what kind of tone and voice I want to have. So yeah, those are my earliest inspirations in the academic setting. But of course in college, and I'm a Facebook friend of hers, Deb Geisler from Suffolk University, who was my media law professor, was my toughest teacher in college. Never got an A in her class, no matter how hard I studied. I would be picked apart, almost like, Peyton Manning picking out the defense when he was playing for the Indianapolis Colts. That's how she was, but she challenged me. She made me kind of dig a little bit deeper. Kind of like Jeff Gordon in the 2015 season when he wasn't always the fastest driver on the track, but he and Alan Gustafson found a way to extract the most out of the 24 car. That's how I felt like she was with me. And I really credit her to this day, and Richard Price as well. He's a sports writer in Boston that I've lost touch with, unfortunately, Mr. Price, but he was one of the best sports writers I know and public relations writers I know as well. I say that those were my two inspirations. And in terms of the world of sports, obviously Steve Wade, I looked up to. I also looked up to other writers as well, the late Ben Blake. It hurts me still to this day, 6 years later, how we lost him, unfortunately. But he was a great writer as well. Steve Burns, the broadcaster from Fox and TNN and TBS. He was a great inspiration for me as well. Daniel Trotta, Bob Jenkins, Ken Squire, who, I want to send my prayers to the Squire family as well. I'm hoping everything will be okay with Ken. He's a great broadcaster and a great wordsmith, as I mentioned on my Facebook. It's funny that I don't really talk a lot about writers who inspired me, but rather broadcasters. And that's because I feel like with my writing, the key to my success, really, I feel like, has been writing with your heart. And if you do that, it's not that you're trying to be blinded by your emotions, but be pure. I mean, there's no other person who can write that piece but you. And it's okay to copy and emulate a style, per se, like Marty Smith. He's a great sports writer, by all means. I think, and I've met him before, and I've told him how much I admire his works. And he's like, that's great, but be you, man, be you. And I was like, I was 29, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't have a style. And you kind of mentioned that I do. So it's made me realize that over the years, I have kind of fine-tuned that approach. And I try to be a storyteller. And like I said, be an emphasis of truth. And really, at the end of the day, just try to show the passion and fun with my writing. Because anyone else out there in the racing world can talk about how the car is running or, statistics. And that's great. That's just not me. I would rather be the person that tells you more about the human side to somebody, whether it's in NASCAR, IndyCar, F1, any walk of life. Even if I had to write about like a merchant I talked to at my job, I would rather focus on who they are as a human being versus the numbers that they, processed for the week. I just found that the human element is, it's really fun and engaging. It's immersive, and it's just fun to learn about other people versus like having preconceptions of them. And when you write about these people, you kind of like learn along the way that your viewpoints of that person were actually not as good as you thought they were. So it's good to be that purveyor of truth.
Yeah, Rob, it was so nice to listen to you tell your story of how you've developed as a writer over the years. And for me personally, I started writing for a media outlet that I will not name when I was 16 years old. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it was my very first article was about Jeff Gordon, and it was really, really, really bad. And when I say bad, it's something that that you want to, print off, ball it up, and throw it as far as you can across the fence. Like it was really that bad. And at the time, keep in mind, 16 years old, don't really know a lot about journalism in general, and I thought I could type 3 long paragraphs and turn it in to the editor, and then my editor is like, "What in the world is this?" And and the next part, this is when I got my feelings hurt. He basically said, "This is garbage," and and in WordPress he actually put it in the trash, and then I was like, "What do you mean it's trash?" And that was actually that was definitely an awakening for me because I thought I was a really decent writer because when I was in class, my teachers always told me that you're one of the best writers in the class, and I always got praise for doing so well on my writing assignments, and and to be told that my writing was garbage, then I'm be honest, that really crushed me, and I didn't even last at the media outlet for long. I was gone within a week after I started. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know in today's day and age, with a lot more experience and wisdom, I know when stuff like that happens, you can't just quit because you think someone is being mean to you. You have to be able to accept that constructive criticism. And at the time, I'm not really sure you can just. I'm not really sure if I can blame the editor for saying that, or maybe it was just me being so inexperienced and not knowing AP style, all of those rules, and that you just can't write 3 long paragraphs and call it an article because that is not an article at all that I know nowadays, and that was a really frustrating time, and then after that went I went to, I believe it was the Niner Times at UNC Charlotte. I was there for a little while, and then it didn't work out anymore. I was looking for another writing opportunity, and I do feel like I improved my writing skills a little bit there. And at the time, I've been studying some of the writers in the motorsports world, like John DeGeese from Sports Car 365. His style of writing is definitely one of my favorites. And whenever I'm writing something, I always try to emulate that style because I just really like it. And also Jeff Gluck, Matt Weaver, read some of their things as well. So at this point in my life, I knew what an article was supposed to look like, unlike I was when I was 16 years old. Lots of inexperience, had no idea what I was doing. And then when I come to the podium finish, then you really opened my eyes up to a lot of writing that and a lot of details about it that I had no clue about before. And I really struggled a lot with my transitions, and I still do from time in my writing. And when you sent me this list of transitions, I'm like, wow. Yeah, and I went through the list, checking it out, and it was really hard at first because I'm like, yes, these transitions are gonna make my writing flow and it's gonna sound a lot better, but it was definitely something brand new to me, and I just had to work at it to get better. And as you mentioned earlier, it's really difficult being a student and a writer at the same time because obviously school has to come first, and you need to make sure you're able to get all of that taken care of, and I just didn't have as much time to write as I'd like, and then I believe it might have been 2 summers ago. I was having a really rough time, and I didn't take advantage of the summer like I should have. I'll be honest, I was like in a deep depression. I don't know what was wrong with me, to be honest. I was just feeling really bad, and I literally would stay in bed for most of the day, and then get up in the afternoon, stay up a few hours and get back into bed. It was just a very unproductive time in my life, and and I did see a lot of improvement with some of the articles that I've written for the Podium Finish and all. Yeah. Now for the most part, I'm just basically participating in our podium previews. I really enjoy doing that. Can't wait to be a part of it again next year. And and it's weird because during the pandemic, a lot of people told me that they've learned a lot of things about themselves and and for I don't know what happened. Maybe it was because classes were moved online and I got really sick of remote learning. But for some odd reason, I've I've like the passion that I have, for actually writing, it's kind of fallen off a little bit within the past several months. I remember back before the pandemic, my passion for it was at an all time high. Then the pandemic came around, and then my passion for writing, just started to diminish, and it really made me sad because that was something that I was really passionate about, and then I started doing more live broadcasting like we're doing right now, and I was like, hey, I think if I do a little bit of writing, do a little bit of live broadcasting, that'd be great for me. Yeah, and I really enjoy being able to do what I'm doing right now, participating with the podium previews, still practicing my writing there, writing the script for a lot of our programs here. Yeah, still getting a lot of practice, and also trying to fine tune my broadcasting skills. I know I have a lot to learn, and I have a lot of room for growth here at Grit Network Broadcasting live on the air.
Well, let me say, y'all are doing a great job with the show. In a lot of ways, I feel like it reminds me of my early years in the motorsports industry because I used to do a podcast. So I didn't do the video form like y'all do, but we always had a script as well. It's not as organized as you guys do now, but somehow we found a way to make it work, and it just it brought me back to how I wanted to prove myself and kind of break the mold, if you will. So you guys are onto something really good, and I think it's important to feel useful during the pandemic. It's really hard because we're told to stay home, and we should. I think it. Yeah, I'm not trying to be the government agent right now. I'm not, but if we want to celebrate 2021, we want to be here for the future with our current family members, and not have to think about how we might we don't have to live in fear for too long. Let's make the sacrifices right now so we can enjoy the future and then become more appreciative people. I don't know if it's going to be an overnight change that this pandemic is going to force us to be better human beings, but it's done a lot, made a lot of us do a lot of soul searching. And I think that's what you kind of, talked about there, Kobe. And I think we've all done a little bit of that. I mean, I've looked at my mental health as well, and I've learned to balance my time with work, the podium finish, NASCAR pole position, and just having a regular life, even during the pandemic. Like, I think it's just important sometimes for me to just unwind, whether that's playing my Nintendo Switch to just shoot the breeze, or watch the Filipino programs with my parents, or just doing anything else but writing. Because to me, or even listening to music, and I want to get into that a little bit really quickly before we get to our next topic. The one last thing I wanted to add about the writing process, and it's kind of maybe counterproductive, so this may not work for everybody out there, but for me, I listen to music. So I listen to a lot of Electric Light Orchestra. I listen to a lot of Depeche Mode, original, like, old Billy Joel songs, a lot of the later Beatles material, Queen, Feist, and a lot of other bands that my sister recommends that I probably don't remember right now. And I don't want to give her credit that she's actually a good music aficionado, because if I do, that would be like me admitting defeat. So I'm not going to do that right now on the show. But I like to listen to music because it gets my creative mindset flowing. Like, I go, wow, where did they get this idea about a waterfall doing this to your emotions, or like talking about the jungle? And it's not like in a stereotypical way. I was like, I feel like I'm being taken to another world sometimes when I listen to music, and that helps me kind of like unleash my words onto the keyboard rather than being afraid or timid about it. Because I think there's so much out there now these days where people want to write, people want to do podcasts, and that's great. You have to have your own unique identity like you guys do on the grid. And I'm sure eventually when I have my own show down the road, I don't know how it's going to look, but I always feel like it's good to be original, and you guys do a great job doing that.
Thank you. I know it's really something else, this entire grid network that has essentially all started up this year, just sort of as okay, we're in this pandemic situation, make the best of it. Of course, has Cody had mentioned, you being cool with him, being part of this, he has really helped me out because, like, I started this, it was the grid ranking on Twitter. Our grid ranking where we take the 7 top series, Formula One, Formula E, IndyCar, NASCAR, MotoGP, World Rally Championship, and the Australian Supercars, and rank them annually to see who is the best driver globally each and every year. And it's been a lot of fun, some slow growth. And then this year, when the pandemic hit, I know I was doing some videos for another channel, World Racing Media. Then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll do one for Grid. Then it just ballooned to this Grid network. Cody's been really helpful with all the journalism. And then we've really expanded. I know Matt White, he's been part of the Grid ranking. This is the second year of the World Motorsport League. He's over in London, the United Kingdom. This year, we added Jessica from Paddock Insight. She is our MotoGP and F1 analysis from Argentina. Jack from Formula E Zone during the Formula E Fest. He's in London as well. And then Grid Girls with Danielle from Racers, the Girls Behind the Helmet. He's in Italy. And every week, our Grid Girls program just highlighting all the women racing around the world. And then recently, we had Adam in Supercars join us. And he has some NASCAR thoughts as well. So we have him on some of the bigger NASCAR race days as well. And one of the big things, it is fun seeing that team build, seeing something grow. I know we've had what started as like shows that we had, like, we were excited for 40 or 50 views. Now we're getting 100 views. We stream on YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, Facebook. We have our shows on our LinkedIn page too as well. So really been growing, and knowing how much you put in the Podium Finish, the success you had growing there, and seeing some of the things we've been doing here, where do you think are some of the things Grid going forward do you think should be heading in the right direction? Some of the next steps Grid could be even looking at?
Well, I think you guys have a great foundation already, expanding your presence internationally, because really, I think that's what's a beautiful thing about the motorsports community is that it's not just a United States sport. It's a European sport. It's an Australian sport. It's a South American sport. It's an everywhere sport. It may not be a NASCAR sport it may not be NASCAR emphasized in the Philippines per se. They love Formula One down there, but certainly they're knowledgeable enough to know who Jimmy Johnson is, or who Kyle Busch is. They know when they see that 18 M&M's car that's Kyle Busch. You guys have a great foundation already in terms of having a lot of different perspectives. Doing these video shows as well, being expansive across social media, and just not being afraid to take chances. Expand upon that. Eventually, when you guys continue to do these shows, and hopefully the pandemic does subside, and those vaccines do come through, or there's enough people in the population globally who can take those vaccines and not get sick or have those minimal effects from COVID-19. I think it'd be cool to have your show kind of be at the racetrack. Now, I know certain racing series may not be too privy to having a live broadcast while a race is going on, but maybe like an on-site show or like a tweet up event where like y'all could interact with your followers and fans over there. And, even if you do interviews with drivers, those could be things you could put onto the show that would really help. So you guys are onto a lot of great things. Just, I know that Kobe's a great go-getter. I've seen him grow from this kid who, I'll be honest, he had a really hard time believing in himself. But I was like, he reminds me a lot of my younger self. And all he needed was a little pat in the back, like, come on, man, you can do this. Like, believe in yourself. Don't be afraid to make a mistake once in a while. It's okay. Put yourself out there. Don't be, put everything out there. Don't leave anything out on the table, because if you do, you're going to be sitting there going, yeah, that would have been awesome if I had done that. But man, I didn't. You got to make every shot you can. If you miss, you miss. There's no harm done. No one's going to freak out as long as you're a professional. You're gracious to learn from your experiences. So just keep doing what you guys are doing. I mean, I love what you guys are doing. And it's in fact inspired me, I feel like, to get better as a journalist, to not just be a writer. I want to do like shows like these because I feel like you guys are reaching out to other people. And the great thing is, this is permanent. So, I mean, You're old. I mean, it's kind of hard. I'm 35 years old. 10 years from now, and I'm 45, I can go and say to my kids eventually, if I have kids and I have a wife, I can be like, hey guys, you want to see dad when he was younger and talking to Joe and Kobe on a racing show? They may not want to, but I'll be like, oh, you guys have no choice. Let's put the TV on and we can watch YouTube. And that's the great thing. It's what the late James Avery said from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when he was being interviewed to be the voice of Shredder. He was saying, the nice thing about your being on the world is when you're contributing to the world of media is everything you record will be out there and will last longer than your life. So that's comforting to know that a piece of you will stay in the world, but you got to be careful. You have to be conscious about your thoughts and your actions, and respect people and respect other people's feelings and comforts, because if you make one bad mistake, it's gonna linger forever.
Exactly, that's the thing. It's. I remember it was about like a few weeks ago. I was talking to Kobe, and it was I think before or after a show. And I was like, my wife told me this, Kobe, and it didn't hit me until now. Unless YouTube was to change something drastically, we're going to be long gone, and we're still going to be talking on YouTube as people are pulling up, especially some of the evergreen content. Oh, Podium Finish. Oh, that's the guy that founded it. I want to see what he had to say to Joe and Kobe, and this could be 20, 30 years from now. So it's really, you bring up, it is something interesting where, it's permanent. And then the one thing, as you mentioned, like, what do you have to lose? What do you have to gain? For me, it was simply with this pandemic, being unemployed. Well, I mean, it started with a really old, like, laptop from 2008, software where I had to essentially try to figure out how to work. And now it's just grown to a point where it's like, okay, videos are coming easier. We're getting better and better with the video graphics and everything. And it's just been a lot of fun. And I do think it is exciting that other people are getting inspired, like, oh, this is really cool. I know last Sunday we had a person that was watching our program. It was like, I want to get into MotoGP. When does the season start? Jessica and I were able to answer that question. It's like we just connected some motorsport fan to MotoGP for next year. That's really exciting. Definitely, I think, like you said, I know one of the big goals for Portland International Raceway, we want to be out there at the track. We want to do something like Trackside Live. And if we were to grow to something where it's like, oh, hey, every Saturday, Grid Live pre-race, they're at a different race, whether it's a NASCAR race, an IndyCar race, one of those venues. Go there, have a good time, and just be part of the show, the program. And that's something where, for me, the sky is the limit. Depending on how things go, we'll keep going with it because, I mean, there's not a whole lot except just saying, hey, we did it. If it worked out, wonderful. If it didn't work out, a lot of memories. And I think it's been a highlight of 2020 working with Kobe and the Grid Network. Now, I know I've been really proud of everything that's happened. I can only imagine you're probably really proud of everything going on with the Podium Finish. Essentially, being editor-in-chief, what's one of the proudest moments you have right there with the Podium Finish?
I think really the day that I decided that I couldn't do it alone, when I expanded the website to be, an actual team in 2013, when I added Ashley, who's one of my better friends, to this day. We may occasionally butt heads, and I certainly don't agree with everything, but we're still good friends. We probably talk to each other quite a bit. Kobe as well. He's a good friend of mine. I consider him like a little brother from another family. All the friendships I formed over the last 6-7 years on the Podium Finish. As much as I enjoy doing these interviews with the drivers like Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, and doing the interviews through emails or phones, face-to-face or on Zoom, I think just working with people has been like my highlight, just because it's like it rejuvenates me in a way. Like I added this young woman from North Carolina. Her name is Tara Jones, and I every day she would text me. She would always say, "I'm so sorry, I'm late." I'm like, Tara, just treat me like it's a professional environment, but we're friends. Like it's okay. Like you have a real life just as I have a real life. And it's just fun to see the enthusiasm and the excitement from all of the new writers, as well as those who have been with me for a long time. Just because it's like I love my family, whether it's my actual family, who I love very dearly, like my dad, who served in the Navy, my mom, who sacrificed a ton just to make sure my sisters and I had a great life, and still do. Um, my sisters, Luna and Tess, who I love so dearly. I know I'm a pain in the butt to them, but they're my earliest influences in terms of being creative and being unique to myself and being a writer. They were my earliest inspirations, but in terms of answering the question, I think just connecting with people, because especially now, I think it was good practice for me to connect with others, because now I think that's what kept me sane during 2020, is knowing I had the tools, the experiences to equip myself during a pandemic, per se. And it sucks to not have gone to a race, or go to a restaurant like Kobe has mentioned, or hugging somebody. I think we haven't mentioned that. I miss hugging my family or my friends. I'm a hugging kind of person, not to sound kind of weird, but like I miss being able to not just be like, hey, elbow bump, or fist pump. Like I'm a really expressive individual. I've grown out of my shell to be like very interactive. What you see is what you get. I mean, I'm not like Kenny Wallace. I'm on adrenaline. I'm just generally a very enthusiastic individual. I don't need coffee to be alert. And I think when people ask me, how are you so excitable? How the heck do you always have a smile on your face? And I'm like, because I love people. Whether I agree with them or not, I love them. I may not love when people are mean to each other, and I certainly try to be an ally to people who've been bullied or been told they're not good enough, because I think people are good enough to do what they want to do. And saying that, when Kobe kind of mentioned about that situation about when he wrote that Jeff Gordon article when he was 16, I do remember when I brought him to the podium finish and having to coach him along and tell him, like, come on, man, like, you got this, you can do this, like, believe in yourself. Because I really do believe in Kobe and people like him and those who want to be whatever they want to be. I mean, we're not a video game. Life is only a one life experience. So, use it wisely, appreciate your time on earth, and, use your God given talent, whether that's being a good singer, being a good writer, whether that's a good voice actor like Rob Paulson. Not to name drop anyone from Animaniacs, a show I love very much, but I just feel like we can't waste time on Earth. Let's make the most of it.
Yeah, make the most of it and definitely encourage others to follow their dreams too. I know it's too easy to, especially seeing, aspiring people entering car racing. Oh, it's very hard, don't do it. No, give it a shot. Go for it. That's one of the things I really enjoy in motorsports. It's the one sport where, any person, no matter what gender, what age, what race, they could go out there behind that steering wheel. They're just as equal as anybody. It doesn't matter who they are. And if they put in the skills and the time and effort, they could go out there and win. And definitely, I would agree with everything you said. And yeah, it's 2020 has been definitely something else, I think, for everybody. And well said, everything you said about being a positive influence and making the most out of your life here on Earth.
Yeah, definitely, Joe. Yeah, I know this is an old saying that's been used over and over, but YOLO, you only live once, so you might as well make the best of it and take all the chances you can to move forward. Because I'll be honest, I've had incidents in my life, whether it's personal and professional, where I wish I would have made a move. If I did, it would have turned out a lot better than I did, remaining silent. So sometimes you just got to go out there, lick a stamp, and send it. And Rob, along with your duties at the Podium Finish, I know that you received the great opportunity this year with NASCAR Pole Position magazine, and you've shared a lot of your wonderful stories with the entire team, and I've truly enjoyed reading them. You've been fortunate enough to interview a lot of major names in the motorsports industry, particularly NASCAR, and do what you love the most, as you said, telling stories through your riding. And I'm just a little curious, how did this amazing opportunity come together, and was this something you expected several years ago?
Well, it kind of started 2 years ago with one of my friends, Joshua Shelton from Speedway Media. He kind of like knew someone from the magazine, Josh Mall, who's my boss, my editor over at Roar Magazine. He was like, "Hey, man, they're looking for a writer. Why don't you kind of like put yourself out there?" And I was like, "Yeah, right. They're not going to talk to me. I mean, I'm just an online journalist. They're not going to want me on there. They got, Jared Turner. They've got Ben White, people who've written for national media outlets. Why would they want me?" And it was a long process because, admittedly, it took longer than 2 years to get on that organization. But, one of our good friends, Matteo Marcheschi, from Illinois, he was a writer for them who covered eNASCAR. He kind of like talked to Josh during this time last year, and he was like, "You may want to have Rob Tiongson join NASCAR pole position and Roar." So around this time last year, we started to have really serious conversations, just kind of logistical talks about what it would take to bring me on board. And, once we agreed on things, I'm meticulous, and I think that's maybe a Boston thing for me. I wrote down every conversation, not like a like some kind of agent, but I would write down notes from our conversations just because I didn't want to like wake up in the middle of the night and go, "Oh, that was just a dream." Like, come on. So like I wrote down every note, like important takeaway from my calls, just because I wanted to make sure it really did happen. And sure enough, in January, I was teasing it during last winter on Instagram and Facebook. I would put like little black and white photos and trying to be like Dan Patrick when he made the move from ESPN to his own little radio show on NBC Sports Network, or Versus at the time. And I wanted to be like him, like because Dan Patrick's one of my great inspirations in sports journalism. When that moment actually happened in January, and they gave me the goal, go ahead to join the magazine, I was like, well, all right, let's give me my first article. So I had to make several pitches at them. It's not like the Podium Finish where, it's kind of an open door policy. Over there, it's much more structured like a real magazine is. So they asked me what I wanted to write. So I sent them like 10 different pitches, which is excessive, I admit. But I wanted to make sure, if there was at least one good idea that they took, that I could run with it. Well, fortunately, they liked a few of them. So, out of those conversations came In the Hot Seat, which is my, twice a week interview series with drivers or personalities in NASCAR and ARCA. And then, I was their social media correspondent for a bit. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit us in the U.S., of course, NASCAR came to a pause for about 9 weeks. So they approached me and they were like, "Hey, do you want to cover the Replacements 100? And I was like, "eNASCAR? What is this? This is just NASCAR Racing 2003, but with people thinking they're NASCAR drivers." And boy, was I wrong. I mean, I learned that it was a really interesting experience because these are people who spent tens of thousands of dollars in some cases just to go and compete in eNASCAR. And I'm thinking, man, I was just happy to have a gaming controller or using my keyboard and pressing up as my accelerator or my, the throttle or turning left with my left keyboard. These are people who are just, as intense and competitive as their on-track drivers. But to kind of summarize my answer, I was really persistent when a few people gave me that opportunity. So I don't want it to be seeming like I did it on my own. I have to credit, Joseph Shelton, a great writer in his own right, who, kind of started that conversation, knocked on the door like that. And Matteo, who he's just like you. He's really feisty, he's really tenacious, but he's always a good advocate. And I don't forget when people help me out, just because I know that, it's really, I think we talked a little bit about this. It's easy to think it's like me all the time. But when we help out others, it's like, it's not only just a good feeling, but you just never know how those consequences could help you ultimately. Not that it should be your primary motive. So I have them to thank as well. And, Josh Mull, he's a great editor. Craig Barraconcilli, a great publisher, runs the publishing company in Florida. He's a great guy, Bostonian as well. So, there's a lot of people at AE Engine the people who run that magazine that I'm very thankful for this opportunity, and I look forward to contributing with for them next year, and hopefully for the future. But you know, I'm known as a NASCAR journalist, I feel like, to a lot of people, but I would love to expand myself into the world of Formula One, just because um, during this pandemic, another thing that got me through it was watching a lot of traveling shows. So I've watched a lot of NHK TV and this show called Cycle Around Japan, and I was thinking, man, I miss living in the Philippines and getting to, experience a different type of transportation like a jeepney or tricycle. And I didn't realize when I was in my mid to late 20s how good I had it. And I'm glad that my parents are like, let's just go on an adventure and not live in the U.S. for a couple of years. It's not an easy decision to go to your home country, if you will, because you get really humbled and find out how spoiled you are as a Westerner. Because you find out how other people have to survive day to day, and it's not just enjoying the food over there. It's to see how people over in a different country have to survive, make ends meet, or in some cases how for a lot of Filipinos, they support their family by living overseas in a different country where they don't even get to see their family members. So I know it's kind of not on topic, but I certainly want to send my thoughts to overseas Filipino workers as well, who are making the ultimate sacrifice to not even be with their families right now, wherever they are. I know it's not easy right now, but even back then, without the pandemic, I mean, they're not even home. And the holidays is tough when you're not seeing your family. So, I just know that I'm thinking about y'all too.
Yeah, definitely. I thought some prayers with all of those wonderful people and everyone else around the world as well. And one of the things you mentioned in your story about how you got this opportunity with NASCAR Pole Position magazine. One of the things that my mentors always told me, it was Jim Sands and Joe Dexter at Rockingham Now when I worked for the local newspaper here in town. They always told me that yes, it's great to have all these skills and showcase all your talent to people all around, whether it's in your industry, outside of your industry, future employers or whatever. They say, yeah, all of that is great, but a large part of getting your foot in the door is building relationships within the industry, and making those connections and getting your foot in the door. Sometimes that can be the difference between making it or not making it in your desired industry. And I've seen that play out in my personal life as well, because I actually got an opportunity to do some PR work for NASCAR Xfinity Series driver Colby Howard with JD Motorsports at the end of the season. I was able to do two races with them at Texas Motor Speedway and Martinsville Speedway. It was a great experience. Definitely, it was such a big transition for me because I'm always used to focus on the field as a whole, and then I'm responsible for all this information with one driver. And yeah, it was definitely a change of pace, but by the time Martinsville come around, definitely got the hang of it, and it's really crazy because that opportunity wouldn't have happened at all if I hadn't have built the connection with the people who set me up to run Colby Howard's account during those two races. I met those people at Charlotte Motor Speedway last September 2019, and we had a great conversation. They were like, "We've been following you on Twitter the past few years. We like what you do, and we just want to get to know you for who you are in person. Like we know who you are online, but we want to get to know you." And we had a great conversation. I think it might have lasted 90 minutes or so. Might have been a little bit longer. Might have been 120 minutes, 2 hours. But definitely learned a lot about me. And then over a year later, I get the phone call. They're like, "Hey, you remember us?" They're like, "We want to give you an opportunity to get your foot wet in PR. They say it might help you out later on." Yeah, yeah. Right now, it looks like I might be able to do some PR in 2021 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. It's not concrete yet, but we're just gonna see what happens there. You're very excited and I feel very blessed to have all of these opportunities that I've had so far. Whether it was at the outlet I was at when I was 16 years old, although it didn't really end like I wanted it to, it didn't even last a week on my part. It was still a good experience for me to show me that I need to learn a lot about the motorsports journalism industry, and that I just needed to continue to work hard. And then when I was working with the Niner Times, yeah, I learned a lot there as well. And with the Podium Finish and Grid Network, yeah, even if I never go any further with with my career in motorsports, I'm still very fortunate for all of the people that I've met and everything that I've accomplished. If it all ended today, yeah, although there's some things I haven't accomplished yet, I still be at peace knowing that I went out there and tried my very best at the end of the day. And another question I have for you, Rob, how difficult is it managing the podium finish, then working your job in the office on the weekdays, and then your commitments with NASCAR pole position as well?
It can be really challenging because of the fact that 24 hours in a day sounds like a lot, but of those waking hours, I mean, you're hopefully asleep for 6 to 8 hours. So that gives you, well, I have 8 hours I work at, each weekday. So that's 16 hours already that you have to consider. So then I only have 8 free hours in that day to make something happen with everything else. So, I try to just have a plan in my head of how I'm gonna space out my day or allocate my time and resources into writing an article for NASCAR pole position / work magazine, or working on articles for the podium finish, and then obviously having a real life because you have to balance that. I always emphasize to people in the motorsports industry or any craft that they are really committed to being a part of. It's great to put all of your efforts and your energy and your concentration into something, but you always have to find a little time for yourself. So I always try to allocate at least 1 to 2 hours of each day during the week to myself, just to kind of catch my bearings, just to kind of reflect and just kind of decompress. Just because if you don't, you get burned out really quickly, and it's almost like I view every day as almost driving the Coca-Cola 600. You're not going to win on hour one or hour two of the day. You just kind of have to slowly take the day as it goes. And as you keep putting yourself out there, contending throughout the day, as I say, you can allocate those, you can, extract the most out of yourself energy wise. I feel so. I think I got better with that as the season went on, because at some point during the year in July, I felt like I broke down mentally and energy wise. Like I just felt like I hit a really hard rock or wall. That was not fun. And that was the first time I realized, yeah, I'm not indestructible. So, I had to take time to myself, and I told my magazine, I'm like, told people at the magazine, I needed a little bit of time to just kind of get my bearings, recoup a little bit. They were like, yeah, that's fine. But then I kind of had the Tom Brady mentality too, where I'm like, well, dang it. If I keep taking too much time off, they're going to find somebody else to take my seat. And I earned this seat. I don't want to lose this seat. He said something on the Brady 6 documentary. It's on ESPN Plus or on YouTube, I think. He said something like, I don't take my role I don't take it for granted. Because if I do, there could be somebody else out there who takes my job. They might impress that person. So, I mean, yeah, I'm all about balance. I'm all about trying to, be good about mental health. And, I'm 35 years old. I realize I haven't accomplished everything I wanted when I said I was 27 and I thought I'd be the best writer. Obviously, there's a lot of good writers out there, and I'm learning every day to be a lot more humble about that. You just have to take one day at a time, but you have to give it your all. And don't be afraid to take the punches sometimes, because it can hurt to get criticized. It can be hurtful when your editor says, yeah, no, I really don't like that article, and that's just not what we were looking for. You can disagree with it. You can, grit your teeth and go, oh, I don't like it. But, I think at the end of the day, you have to check your ego at the door. That's why I look at the store over here and I'm like, when I enter this office, my home office here, this is my music studio, if you will. It's almost like when the Beatles go to Abbey Road. Hopefully not 1969 when they're all fighting with each other about everything. It's more like the 1963, 64 Beatles when they're having fun and just collaborating. Well, I get to have that experience with you, Kobe, with Ashley, Tara, everybody on the Podium Finish, TPF, as we call it colloquially, and NASCAR pole position, and even the fans on Twitter that I get to talk to. I may not have the biggest reach like you guys do, but I find that you have to balance your time, but you also have to be a competitor as well. So it hurts that Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. It kills me that he went to go to Florida, but I look to him in terms of how he just never let anybody take his role for 20 years. And that's kind of me too. I mean, I don't want anybody to think that anyone can take my spot in the NASCAR pole position. So in a way, as selfless as I am, I try to be a little bit selfish in that role. But with the Podium Finish, I of course try to be a team player.
Yeah, definitely. And there's one thing in your answer that I really think that's super important for everyone to know is when you feel like something's too much, it's okay to take a step back. And that's something that I realized this year because like when we switched to remote learning from in-person learning, it was really crazy trying to get set up with everything on the internet. My classes were going crazy, assignments due everywhere, and I've experienced this lately here with Joe at the Podium Finish. I've had to like take a little step back with some of the things I've been doing, like writing the script for our programs because I had like so many assignments due, didn't really have a lot of time to dedicate to our programs. Felt really bad about it. And Joe even told me like, hey Kobe, if you're so busy, it's okay. You don't have to like do the show at this time, but but you know me, Rob. I can't do that as much as yeah, there was some opportunities when Jessica handled the programming on Saturday and Sunday, but in my heart I felt like I needed to be there, and also there were some times on our Grid Tonight programs on Wednesday nights when I was like really busy, and in all honesty I really should have just focused on my schoolwork and let Joe handle that, but I'm a team player. I always want to be here and just contribute to Grid Network, and if I'm not here, I feel like I'm missing out because I want to be here contributing and continue to grow. And back going back to the spring, I remember when you know Kenneth Lee Jr. I you mean yeah, we used to do the 7 points columns where we pick seven topics in the motorsports world and just write a little commentary piece about it. And actually we don't do that anymore because it started to become way too much for me because doing the podium previews and then figuring out if I'm going to be able to do some feature stories for the Podium Finish and school, it just started piling up on me. And then I was like, I really don't want to get rid of 7 points. But there came one point, where it was just too much, and then feature stories as well in written form. That's something I really like to get back to. But yeah, but with everything going on, I just haven't really had a lot of time to dedicate to doing that. And right now, I think I found a great balance in my life. I still need to work on my balance in my personal life, but professionally, definitely feel like I found the right balance doing all the broadcasting here, still staying involved with the Podium Finish, and also that little PR opportunity I had with JD Motorsports and Colby Howard. Yeah, feel like I've really gotten a handle on things for now, and I'm sure as time goes on, I'm gonna have to readjust over again. And I did mention in the motorsports industry, we know that relationships are really important in any industry. Honestly, you meet so many different people coming from all walks of life, and some of these people become our mentors, kind of like you're one of my mentors, and I have a lot of them, and others lifelong friends. Like I'm sure we'll be Rob and Joe and a lot of other people I've met in the motorsports industry. And Rob, I know in our conversations and earlier tonight, I know you mentioned Steve Burns as someone that you look up to and admire, and we still, I still really miss Steve Burns every single day, and we'll still feel that way for the rest of our lives. Such an incredible person and an important member of the NASCAR community gone too soon. How did Steve Burns have an impact on your career in motorsports journalism specifically?
Well, the impact he had on me was just that he just reached out to me. He actually answered I considered myself a fan in 2008, 2009. I wouldn't say I was a full out journalist at that time, but Yeah, back then I was a lot more like, hey, let's take a chance. Let's look people up on social media to see if that's really who they are. I don't think Steve Burns. I don't know if he had a Twitter account in 2008, 2009, but I know he certainly had a Facebook because a few of my early Facebook friends, which started off as a college account and became like my professional, personal connection account. I had befriended some people in NASCAR. Well, Steve Burns happened to be one of those people. So I, sent him a Facebook message and I didn't really expect him to really respond back, but I was like, hey, Steve, I'm a big fan of your work as a broadcaster. I admire your professionalism you've brought over the years. Could I interview you for a feature on Bleacher Report? And he's like, certainly, young man, let's do that. And he's like, can you do a phone call? And I was like, well, there's a problem because I'm in the Philippines and you're in America. There's like a 13-hour time difference, so I don't really want to talk to you at like 2 a.m. in the morning. Well, it's 3 p.m. over there for you. But can we get you, through email? He's like, yeah. So like he gives me his email address. So I fired off about 10 questions over to him, and just asked him about his career, about the state of NASCAR back in 2010 or 2009 rather. Excuse me. And we talked about what was going on there in the season. We talked about his journey and how he was working with the Redskins at the time, back in 1885, and then he certainly, slowly but surely found his way into NASCAR as a co-host, I think, for Inside NASCAR, or as it was called, Inside Winston Cup on TNN, which is now Paramount Network, for you TV junkies out there. I always loved the way Steve just presented himself on TV because he was, to me as a young man, I thought he was so serious. I'm like, he has no personality. But boy, I was really wrong because, especially when he got to be on Fox, I felt like he was given a lot more creative freedom, kind of like how I did the Podium Finish. And when I left the Bleacher Report to go to Farm TPF, I felt like I found my voice at last and my freedom to be who I was. And that's kind of who we got to see on TV with Steve. He was a sincere man. He was really nice. He loves his families, when he had hosted NASCAR, totally NASCAR back in the early 2000s on FS, I think it's Fox Sports Net actually. He even did like a ending segment to introduce his son Bryson on the program, and which I thought was so sweet. But it does bring tears to my eyes when I think about it, so I don't want to get too much into it. But to this day, I think Steve impacts people who he's mentored, just because he was just so very enthusiastic, but he was always so genuine with his approach. One thing that stands out to me was a couple of things. He said to me when I asked him, is there a correct career path? Kind of like how y'all are asking me a bit earlier. And he said, well, first you've got to have a goal and focus on it. Second, raise your hand. Volunteer to do anything that gets you closer to your goal. Third, don't give up. There is no correct path. You have to dedicate yourself to your own path. When I heard that, I was like, that was validating, because everyone always tells me you have to have an internship, you have to work at a racetrack, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I was thinking, well, then I'm really screwing up my chances, because I certainly didn't live near a racetrack in Massachusetts, or much less in the Philippines. But I was glad he told me that, because he kind of made me realize that there is no defined path. If anyone tells you that in the motorsports world, anyone out there who's watching the show, don't listen to that. Do your own thing. Don't be afraid to, do a show like what Kobe and Joe are doing, or to start your own website like I did, or, yeah, you can do the traditional path too. There is no correct path. You just have to be a very open-minded student of the field. Don't be afraid to, be your true self. And there's one other thing I want to read off to you guys from Steve Burns that, when I read his email comment to me years later, oh man, it kind of chokes me up, because obviously he's been gone for the last 5 years. But I thought it was so nice that he said this to me, just because I really didn't expect him to reach out and just say what he did, because it made me feel like I really meant something out to a lot of folks. I can't really find that email, unfortunately, but I think I can kind of summarize it. He said, you're a great writer who writes from the heart, and that's something you should keep on doing. When I kind of read his email now, especially years later, it makes me sit down here like I'm doing right now with you guys, and it makes me realize, how blessed I am to, I may not be the most articulate person when it comes to public speaking, which, I'm glad that I've gotten over my public speaking fears over the years. But as a writer, I feel like that's where, that's where I'm at in terms of my strength. So Steve really impacts me to this day. And the people that, he worked with. I want to give a big shout out to Daniel Trotta, just because, she's a really successful NASCAR personality, broadcaster, and journalist herself, who I feel like was under the tutelage of Steve Burns. There's not maybe a week or month where we talk to each other on social media and just catch up, just making sure that we're all both okay. But she's always been so kind to be there. And Mike Massaro, too, of NBC Connecticut. Great broadcaster. I wish he was still in the sport, like many of us do. But he's a great individual as well that has really shaped me as far as having my own voice, having to be my own person, my own man, if you will, with the world of racing.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of wonderful people in this sport, and when I first started to break into the industry, I was really nervous because I thought that a lot of the people who had quote unquote made it in NASCAR, I thought they would not give me the the time of day. I thought that they'd be a little cocky and arrogant and be like I don't have time for you. I've already made it, and I don't want anything to do with you. But but yeah, unfortunately, I have come across some people like that. But but for the most part, I've come across more good people than I have people who don't really want anything to do with you. Yeah, so there are a lot of great people out there, and you would think like the people you mentioned, like Mike Massaro, Daniel Trotter, and Steve Burns. When I hear those names, I would think just assume I'd be like, I would think there's like not even any reason for me to reach out to people like that because they're not gonna listen to anything that I have to say. But like we mentioned earlier in the program, sometimes you just have to take a chance. Yeah, and you took the chance reaching out to Steve Burns, and and then you guys formed a great relationship from then. He served as a great mentor and someone that you looked up to, and and then years later, reading back on the email that emails they sent you, really emotional, and it just shows how much Steve Burns had an impact on your life, and it's just something that's so wonderful to see people who have already experienced a lot of success within the industry reaching out to the next generation and passing down the torch to those who may be in their position one day in the future. And the last question before we get back to Joe, I can see he's very anxious to chat with you. It's been a while, but here's my final question. I promise, Joe, we're gonna let you get a word in. Rob, do you have any other mentors that you like to give a shout out to, or any special friends that you've made in the industry?
Well, of course, like I mentioned, Mike Massaro, he's a great friend of mine. We used to bump into each other quite a lot at New Hampshire Motor Speedway when I lived in Boston. So when he was with ESPN and eventually with NBC, we'd always talk with each other. He wouldn't, he might be busy, but he never like shunned me away and be like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. Like he would really, be sincere about wanting to catch up with me and find out what I was up to. So, definitely want to say hi to Mike. For sure. Daniel Trotta, as I mentioned, great friend of mine as well, who, she does a great job doing shows on NASCAR Sirius XM with Larry McReynolds, who I want to interview one day, believe it or not. He's one of my bucket list interviews just because I love how like enthusiastic he is. And when I watched the Dale Jr. download, he called, I forget the nickname that he mentioned that he was given. When I watched that show, I was like, that's all the more reason why I want to talk with him. But Daniel, Mike, for sure. Steve Wade is a great mentor of mine. Let me see who else out there. Dustin Long as well. Just because I feel like when I've listened to him in press conferences, when I've been at the racetrack in person, I didn't really know how to frame a question. So I took the time during my first few pressers to like kind of hear how the journalists fielded their question. And I just liked the way he did it just because he didn't seem like he had like a rehearsed question. which to some could be a little bit like, well, just kind of get to the point, bro. But he it works for him, and I kind of found that I could kind of do the same thing, but I try to be a lot shorter with my questions. But Dustin's a great inspiration to me as well, and Dan Patrick, Darren Haynes as well. I think he used to be at ESPN. I actually met him when I was working at Macy's 8 years ago, and I sold him a dress shirt and tie, which is kind of funny because I'm not exactly fashionable. I mean, I'm always wearing this black and gray shirt, which I feel like is my Bob Parker's blue jacket outfit. That people, when they see me, at the track or my Facebook pictures, it seems like I always have a selfie in this shirt. But I gave him some fashion advice, which I'm glad he did because I apparently had good taste that day. But Darren was a great, mentor to me, and a lot of meteorologists, believe it or not, because I'm a weather nerd. I don't think we've ever talked about that. Brian Newdorf and Aaron Studwell, good friends of mine. I wouldn't say they're mentors, but I always want to say hi to them just because they're so great. I'm going to forget so many people. I'm sorry. It's like a NASCAR sponsor right now. But Amy Walsh-Stock, a great friend of mine, obviously, as you know, was the PR person for Jimmy Johnson. I think she's still going to be working with Hendrick Motorsports, but I don't want to speculate too much. But Amy has been so good to me over the years, just because I know she's always had the challenging but rewardingly fun job of working with Jimmy. I can't imagine what it's like to have to field so many interview requests and making sure that you try to balance as many of those as you can, but having sometimes to say no. So I've always respected when she's had to tell me, I don't think we can do it this time. I always think in that sense that a no in that kind of situation is what I call a later yes, which we can talk about at some point. But that's where I feel like you have to be a little persistent. But Amy has been so good, and John Edwards as well. John is a great guy. He's always been so good to me. I feel like he's watched me grow up from being a racing fan who was so happy to meet Jeff Gordon in 2013 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway to, I think, somebody who I think he respects and regards in a good way as a journalist. So, and obviously my family. I mean, they're downstairs right now, so I don't really have to go too far to thank them. But, obviously my parents have shaped me greatly. My mom, I'm a mama's boy, of course, but I'm also, I love my dad as well. They're great folks who, they didn't tell me to get into journalism. In fact, I feel like I'm one of those kids who, in the beginning, they probably were a little resistant to the idea, but then, they respected that I made this choice to go pursue my dreams. And I can't imagine what it's like when you're a parent to have a child. You have a kid, and I'm sure as a parent, you have an idea of what your child should be. And your child goes up to you and says, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. And that probably had to be difficult. But I feel like our relationship got even better. Not that it was never good when I decided to get into journalism, because that was the first time I ever kind of felt like I stood out with my sisters, because they always had their own little, in my mind, their calling. And me, I was always kind of admiring them from a distance. And when I got to be my late 20s, early 30s, and I decided to take this journalism dream more seriously, I decided, well, and I don't want to be defined by this. I am autistic, mildly, but it doesn't stop me from what I do, because it was something that impacted me as a child. But I don't want that to be like, oh, you're the autism guy. You're not. I'm not. I'm a regular human being like you and Joe and anyone who listens into Life on the Grid. For me, it's great to address that stigma of mental health and, your mental barriers, because as a quote, to quote Deanna Troy from Star Trek: The Next Generation, when she was talking to Data, she was like, well, you have to be greater than the sum of your programming. Well, I feel like I had to be greater than the sum of who I was as a young boy, and grow up to be who I am today. I feel like I still have a lot to learn. I'm not old. I'm not super young anymore, but I am learning to embrace life. I am learning to be grateful and, make every minute count of a day. And, just not so much, it's not even just YOLO. It's funny to think, I don't know if you guys ever had this thought, but as a little boy, I used to think, how the heck did I get into the world? Not so much like the process, of course. I don't want to get too gross, but I just mean like an existential standpoint. Hard word to say. I used to think when I was a little kid, I'm like, man, I did I just get here all of a sudden and get to be in this body? And that was kind of a weird thought to have it when I was 5 or 6 years old. But as an adult, I appreciate that I thought that deeply, and I realized every waking minute, every waking hour, and I always go, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Okay, let's roll.
It's something else. I know growing up, I just was like, I always thought, oh, I don't know what I'll do as a grown up. I don't even see myself being a grown up. Now that I'm a grown up, it's like, well, I still don't know what I'm going to do. I'm unemployed, but I'm doing this now. So it's always very interesting. And you brought some really awesome points. I know one of the things you mentioned growing up in the Philippines, spending time there, and then United States. I know as a race fan, I was in Alaska. Racing is not huge there. There's some short tracks here and there, but NASCAR, I was like one of the few NASCAR fans in grade school as a kid. Everybody would be like, oh, that's Joe. He's most likely to be a race car driver because he's the only person that likes car racing. In the Philippines, how is it like if, I could only imagine there's not a whole lot of NASCAR coverage, but in motorsports, is there other sports that are more popular there, like Formula One or even local Philippine racing series that we don't know about?
Well, in the Philippines, in terms of their sports, they really love basketball. So they love a lot of the NBA. They love the Lakers, of course. Obviously for Mamba, rest in peace. Kobe Bryant was their biggest superstar athlete. And not to just say they love LeBron James over there on the Lakers. But they also love Formula One. And I wish I had appreciated it more during my college years, just because, I hear a lot of my friends saying, Sebastian Vettel, he's a great driver. And I'm like, Sebastian, what? What about Schumacher? What about him? But, obviously in 2009, 2010, obviously Schumacher, I think he was coming back at that time and was starting to drive for the Mercedes-Benz team. So a lot of that time period was dominated by Jenson Button, Sebastian Vettel, obviously the Ferrari team with Alonso at the time in the Massa. So I think Formula One was the biggest sport over there. But a lot of the things I would watch, believe it or not, is billiards. And it's really fascinating just because it's a sport of concentration and a sport of good focus and eyesight. Because it's a sport that doesn't discriminate. Let me be honest. Not a lot of those billiards players are the most physique, muscular, athletes. But these guys, they can win good money just trying to make these trick shots or, competing against people from Britain. And I found that really fascinating.
Definitely one of the sports where in billiards, own those skills, then you could really compete against anybody. One quick follow-up question about Formula, and especially in the Philippines. I know you mentioned some of the drivers that were popular, especially when you were growing up there. Have there ever been talk about someday maybe we could host a Grand Prix race?
Oh, I wished I could tell you if there was a confirmation about that, Joe, because I have dreamed about seeing a race over in the streets of Manila or in Quezon City or even Alabang, which is like a city south of Manila, because they really love Formula One. I swear to you, every Sunday morning, early, when it's pitch black as it is right now here in Austin, but in the morning, I'll have a few friends in the Philippines just message me on Facebook and being like, "Hey, Kuya, wake up!" Kuya, which is a Filipino term for brother. They'll be like, "Oh, watch the race." So I'll be like, "All right, let me get up and watch what's. Oh, the race is on. Let me follow along and put it on ESPN2 or whatever network that the ESPN mothership puts it on here in America, and I'll follow along with them." But in terms of answering your question, No, I don't know if there's any conversation about that, but then who knew that Singapore was going to have a racetrack? And lo and behold, that small little country has an amazing, beautiful track. I would love to go there. I don't even care if I'm going to melt over there. I want to like watch the race and take in the sights.
Yeah, that's really cool, Rob. And I had no idea that a lot of people in the Philippines, were really into Formula One like that. So definitely learned something new, and it would certainly be interesting someday if we did see a Grand Prix in the Philippines. Yeah, and like you mentioned, we didn't think Singapore would have a Grand Prix, and look, they got one at night, and maybe in the future. Who knows what can happen? We could see a Grand Prix in the Philippines, just like I've wanted a Grand Prix on the streets of uptown Charlotte, so we can have the Charlotte Grand Prix or whatever. I know that's probably not going to happen, but wishful thinking. Maybe NASCAR with the next gen car, we'll see a street race in uptown Charlotte, and I'll definitely make sure to attend that. And before we run out of time tonight, I wanted to get to one last point before we let you go for the night, Rob. And a few weeks ago, the 2020 NASCAR season concluded, and it started off with Ryan Newman's frightening crash on the final lap of the Daytona 500. And to be honest with you, that incident didn't feel like it took place in February. It really felt like it took place many, many Februarys ago because it's been such a long year. And then it seemed like we were going to race at Atlanta back in March. Then the pandemic arrived and put the entire sports world on pause, including NASCAR and every other major racing series in the world. NASCAR ended up suspending operations effective immediately, and then they used iRacing to pass the time, and we returned to action in May at Darlington Raceway with special protocols in place. However, NASCAR never looked back and completed the season right on time, caught up the schedule, and and I'm sure a lot of people didn't think that was going to happen. But and I definitely take, if I'm NASCAR, huge victory, huge win. We made it and didn't have to stop again, and didn't have any major outbreaks in the garage area that we know of. And one final question of the night for you, Rob. How do you rate NASCAR's pandemic response? And if everything goes according to plan with the vaccine, do you anticipate softening some of the restrictions as the 2021 season goes on?
I have to give them a 9 out of 10, first of all, with their response, just because I think if you were to tell us back in late March that we'd still get 36 races in, that we'd still get the playoffs, and, despite the fact that we lost qualifying and practice, that we still got to have a full season, I'd be like, nah, that's not happening. We're gonna have to race on the computers. But for sure, the NASCAR industry as a whole, whether it's the teams, the drivers, the sponsors, the NASCAR communications team with Matt Humphrey and his great staff. By the way, Matt's a great mentor of mine as well. So hi to Matt. He's a great individual. It was a team effort, and as we've talked about a lot in the show, no man's an island, and NASCAR had to rely on everybody to make everything work. Broadcasting partners had to get creative, as you saw with the season, just because obviously Fox had to kind of end their season in July versus in June, but NBC worked with them as well, and Fox unfortunately had to cover a lot of the rest of their races from the Steve Burns studio, whereas NBC got to travel to the last 5 playoff races of the season. In terms of next season, if the vaccine works out, and I pray to God it does it mean that we're going to reduce restrictions? Well, I don't want to speculate. I've never been in the game of speculating, but if I had to, entertain the question, of course, I would be hopeful they would do it, but I'm sure they're not going to let it be a full out implementation of what we've had beforehand. It's going to be in phases. And I honestly, right now, just kind of reading on things, and depending on how things are implemented and how the public trusts the vaccine, I would say life doesn't get back to normal until 2022. But, I would say we get creative enough that maybe a little bit of the normal that we knew will come back in around April or May. At least that's my hopes.
Indeed, it is something where I think all of us were just so excited about the potential of pre-pandemic life. It's going to be a slow route there, but I definitely think you hit a lot of points, especially with the vaccine. Of course, there's going to be a timetable of who gets it first, and then the general public, and then hopefully we can see some normalcy and be back at the track again. Thank you, Rob, for joining us on Life on the Grid. We loved having you here on the show. A lot of fun. Just definitely want to encourage all our viewers to follow Rob and the Podium Finish on Twitter. You can follow Rob at Rob Tiongson, that is Tiongson, and then on Twitter as well, Podium Finish at the Podium Finish, and be sure to visit the podiumfinish.net website. And I definitely want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporter, Colin. Thank you for supporting the Grid Network. It means a lot. And definitely thank you everyone for watching us. Of course, next up is our musical guest out of the city of Portland, Oregon. Please welcome our musical guest, Travis Mason.
breaking down. down.